everyone. Before I start my talk, I'm going to ask you to do something. When I say the word silent or silence, I want you to say make some noise. Okay? So silent.
Make some noise.
Silence.
Make some noise.
Great. So let's do it one more time, and this time just pick up the volume, okay? Silence.
Make some noise.
Silent.
Make some noise.
Great. Thank you. We'll come back to that in a little while. On that terrible day of September 11th, when those airplanes flew into the Twin Towers in New York City, I felt a huge sense of relief in my body. And I was surprised, but somehow I knew I had spent my life waiting for the nightmare to arrive at my doorstep. You see, both my parents were concentration camp survivors. My mother was in Auschwitz, my father was in Treblinka, and they had, in a moment, their lives changed into a nightmare that they lived through for the rest of their lives. And here's the thing, when you're a child of survivors, you grow into that as well. You have inside yourself the knowing that that could happen again at any moment. And I had that knowing. And I didn't even realize it till September 11th when that relief came inside of me, because I had been waiting for that nightmare to happen. Those of us who live in the wake of the Holocaust, or any Holocaust, or the experience of violence and brutality, we are always looking over our shoulders. We're looking around, we're paying attention in a way that is anxious and looking for the next terrible thing that has happened, because the worst has happened and we know it's going to happen again. And so I'm here to talk to you about what that all means and how we can change that. So when we talk about these terribly traumatic events, we know that our actual DNA can get altered. So that people who go through terrible traumas will also carry within their genetic structure the capacity for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a very, very true and real thing. It's been researched. I'm not making it up. And I want to tell you also that throughout my life, I knew something. I knew that I had actually been at Auschwitz. It was a feeling that I had that I could never explain. I could feel it, I could see it, I could smell it. And I didn't know why. And it took quite a number of years before I could actually explain that to myself. And you know, when I was studying homeopathy and doing some medical sciences, I learned that girls are born with all of their eggs intact at birth. And at puberty, all the things happen and those eggs become available for fertilization. But I realized that I was already existing as an egg inside my mother when she was in Auschwitz, and I was there. And there was also another sense of just knowing something really deep and profound about that. So these traumas, they affect people's lives for generations. For generations, war and devastation just carry on and on and on and on. Violence begets violence, and it goes on. And it doesn't just happen in different parts of the world and, wherever you might be imagining. It is happening right here in Toronto as well. In Toronto, where I work, we know that women have been kidnapped and used as sex slaves. Children are beaten and killed. Grandmothers are put into unheated garages where they live over the winter. Terrible things happen right here in Toronto also, because there's so much violence in the world. And so much of it is self-perpetuating. We don't even notice it. We don't see it. We become a little bit immune to it as well. So what can we do about this? What can we possibly, how can we take that on? And I want to talk to you about that. And before I do, I just want to say a couple of things about the building blocks of violence. So the first building block to violence is prejudice. It's prejudice. See, these are decisions we make in advance, opinions we hold that aren't really based on anything real. They're based on stereotypes that aren't necessarily true, and yet we hold these prejudices to be true. And I'll just give you a few examples of prejudices that could possibly be. So we could say that Jews are all poor and lazy, and black people all eat curry, and women are fantastic basketball players, and men can't really drive. Right? These are all prejudices. I'm making them up, and I'm being a little bit silly, but they're very serious. And one of the prejudices that, you might imagine has to do with the future of the world and who's responsible for what and how it all went down and what's going to happen. And you get people going on these things, and one person tells it to another, and they talk as if it's the truth, and it builds into a movement, and then we find ourselves with this unbelievable story that's not really true, and yet so many people have bought into it. And it's the kind of story that happens as prejudice moves on, because once we look at prejudice as a basic building block to violence, then we move on to the next building block, which is hatred. Add enough prejudice together, and then what you have is movement into hatred. Fuel the prejudice, and the fire turns into hatred. And hatred, of course, leads to violence, and violence begets violence, and it's a self-perpetuating thing that just goes on and on. So I want to talk to you about what we can all do, about just simple and easy things. We don't have to turn our lives upside down and do anything dramatic or huge. We just have to do the simple thing of starting to address prejudice when we hear it, in any form and in any way. And there are some very simple ways to do it. And just one more thing about prejudice. It's very insidious. Prejudice, you almost don't notice it as it's happening. It's the definition of insidious, that it's happening and it's becoming established before we even notice it. And prejudice is very insidious, and it's very toxic for that reason. And it builds and it becomes hatred. So what can we do, and how do we do it? We can start to address prejudice all the time when we hear it in our lives. Simple things. It doesn't have to be big or dramatic. You don't have to have a huge analysis of anything. You could just know that something just made you really uncomfortable, and you know that that thing was racist, or it was homophobic, or it just made you uncomfortable and you're not sure why, but you know that some people have just been demeaned and it's not okay with you. And you can start to do really simple things like say, that just feels really wrong to me. I'm really uncomfortable about that. I actually think that's racist. I think that's prejudice. Always use I statements, right? So when you hear it, when you see it, you can say, I don't like that. That makes me really uncomfortable. That's an easy, comfortable, simple thing that we can all do in our lives as we go about everything in our business. And I've been doing this for decades, so I want to share with you that it's not a particularly challenging thing to do. Sometimes it's a bit nerve-wracking if you don't know exactly what's going on, but it's fine to say to people, this makes me really uncomfortable. I'm not even sure why. And you'll find that as you do it, it actually gets easier, and it gets kind of interesting because you yourself get challenged to think about why it is you're feeling what you're feeling and thinking what you're thinking. And one of the things that happens to us is we start to notice what our own prejudices are. And that's really a good thing, because we live in a society that is filled with prejudice. So if we don't feel it in ourselves, it would be surprising. We kind of take it in by osmosis, and most of us are good people, right? We're not intentionally bad or mean, but we do absorb things in the world, and then we see it in ourselves, and we can go, oh yeah, there it is. And without feeling guilty, just note it and carry on. You don't have to worry about it. You just have to make sure that you're aware for yourself about what you're doing and how you're living your life. And that makes it much more genuine and with greater integrity when you speak to people about the prejudice you're feeling uncomfortable with. And I also want to tell you that as you do this, if you take this on, and it's a challenge I invite all of us to do, I think it's a really interesting thing. And I think it really has the capacity to start to turn violence around. Because when we start to break down prejudice, the building block of hatred starts to tumble too, and then the violence starts to tumble as well. It is truly a way, if those of us who want a better world, those of us who want to see a world without violence, where people aren't being hurt and jeopardized all the time, it would be an amazingly powerful thing if those of us who felt that way started to speak to prejudice in simple ways, saying, you know, that's not acceptable to me. Because the truth is, when you're silent, thank you. When you're silent, make some noise. Exactly. When you're silent, you accept what is. When you're silent, you're telling people that you agree with what they're doing, or what they're saying, or what they're thinking. So it goes a long way to say to someone, you know, I disagree with you, because you're breaking the silence. You're breaking the silence. So when you're silent, you're condoning. When you're silent, you're condoning what people are doing. You're saying, I accept this, I'm willing to go with it, it's okay with me. So it's a very, very significant and powerful thing to break silence. So what do we think breaking silence can achieve? Right? What does breaking silence?
Make some noise.
How do we achieve that? We start to achieve it by very small and simple steps. The things I'm talking to you about are not big or huge or powerful. They don't require you to have an analysis of the world or anything like that. It's just when you hear someone speak in a demeaning way about another human being, you just go, you know, that's not okay with me. I feel really uncomfortable about that. It's a really simple thing. It's really simple. And I'm telling you, if all of us who cared about changing violence in the world did that, we would change it, because there's power in numbers. I really do believe most people do not want to live in a violent world. We don't like what's going on in the world. We feel uncomfortable or unhappy with it. It feels too big to be able to do something about. So what I want to offer is a strategy that's actually really simple, and we can do something about it. We can start to break down those prejudices and say, I don't really like that kid. And that's okay. And listen, this is really important. It's not your job to change anyone's mind. Okay? I think that we often get stuck there. We can't change anyone's mind anyway. People will change their minds when they change their minds. But we can break the silence. We can break the silence. And we can tell people that's not okay for us. And all we can do is talk about ourselves. Our own words and actions are what we're responsible for. We're not responsible for how other people think, but we have to stand up for that moment when people are saying demeaning things to other humans. Because actually we all deserve to be treated with respect and integrity, and we all deserve to be valued. And I think most of us want that in life. We want that in the world. And so I encourage all of us to take that chance to start to address that and start to say to people, this is not okay with me. And I want to say something in particular about jokes. It's been one of the things in my life. I noticed that people who are the loveliest people, who would never say a mean or cruel thing, somehow feel it's fine to say demeaning jokes. And when you go, like, I'm not, you know, that's not funny, it's homophobic. They go, oh, come on, it's just a joke. Don't you find people go, it's just a joke? I've heard that so many times in my life, and I go, well, it's not funny, and it's not a joke, it's actually homophobic. And they go, oh, come on, Gita, you're so serious, right? And that feels so awful, because everyone wants to have fun, and we all want to laugh at jokes. But I think it's really important to just stay aware when people make demeaning jokes, that it's a prejudice that's masked somehow, that somehow people think it's okay to make demeaning jokes when they wouldn't do it in any other conversation in their lives. So that's a curious thing that I've noticed, and I think is really important for all of us to pay attention to. So I just want to repeat, it's not your job to change anyone's mind. It's just your job to break the silence. It's just your job to break the silence. It's the, oh, thank you. Hey! Yes, exactly. So I really do believe profoundly that we can alter the world if we start to take these steps. And that it would make a world for us that's built on kindness, compassion, peace, coexistence, where everyone has a right to live, and we would solve a lot of the world's problems if we came at it from a place of compassion. I mean, we're all talking about different ways of solving different problems, and this is another link in the chain about how it is that we start to take on the task of breaking down violence in a way that is really simple and very easy for all of us to do. What we do is we say, that's not okay with me. I'm really uncomfortable with that. How does that work? It just doesn't work for me. It's really important to start addressing all those things. The only way we're going to change violence is if we're willing to break the silence. That's right. And if we're willing to do that, then we can start to build other constructs. We can start different experiments in the world. I think for the last 100,000 years, if you study history, we've been a violent-based humanity. So maybe it's time today to just start a different experiment. You could think of it. We're in control of our lives. We can start to try an experiment about what it means to work towards peace. How we can actually break many of the codes of silence that exist in the world. And I just want to put out a particularly important thought, I believe, to men. I think men have a fantastic opportunity today to actually make a huge difference in ending violence against women. And I do believe there's a huge code of silence in male culture. Yes, thank you. You're better than I am. We're starting to see men start to address that. We see men going into the military, into government offices, and starting to talk about why there is this silence against talking about violence against women. And that, if we could start to make an impact there, it would change everyone's lives, because that's something we would do for everyone. And there are many, many compassionate and caring men amongst us. I know that, and I know people are working at this diligently. But there is still a huge amount of violence against women right here, all over the world. And it really and truly is because we accept that we can't talk about it. That until we break the silence, we're complicit with it. Until we break the silence, we're complicit with it. We're condoning it. We're saying it's okay. So it's up to us to start to make that difference, and I believe we can if we pay attention closely and kindly and start to address all of those issues whenever we hear the prejudices that are very commonplace today. And this small building block, which is the lowest, when we start to kick that out from under, hatred will come tumbling down, violence will come tumbling down as well. There are many complex issues, which we're not going to talk about today, because what I wanted to offer was a simple strategy that we could all do and that we could all easily in our lives incorporate. And wouldn't it be amazing if all of us did that? What we could accomplish in a very short time, and also over time, how the world would change if we all took the time to do that. So I encourage you all to do that, and I hope that you can. And make it simple, make it easy. You don't have to not say it because you don't know a whole lot about something or other. It really doesn't matter. You don't have to be eloquent. Really, it doesn't matter. You just have to say, that's not okay with me. I feel really uncomfortable about that. It's not okay with me. So as we move through breaking the silence, we start to have a chance to build something new. And I guess that's the message that I want to bring, because I feel really optimistic about that. I feel that there are a lot of people who feel that way, and that's powerful. The more of us that come together to do this, and every person counts in this. So as we move forward and we're prepared to break the silence, we start to really make a difference in the world. We start to allow everyone to have room, and we start to think about things in a different way. I want to also just tell you that throughout my life, I've had great challenges. I had a very difficult early start in life, which I was telling you about earlier. And I've worked really hard for myself to make those changes, to bring myself to a place where I can say I have a really good life. And I really do. I have a great life. And I feel like me standing here giving a TED talk that's really a pep talk to the whole world about ending violence in itself is a little bit of a miracle. And so I just want to tell you that we can do this. It's very possible. I know in my heart we can do this. And I invite you all to get engaged and make it work with me. So, in closing, I just want to say we can do it, and let's go make some noise.